You guys are mostly in blue and black. You associate with each other here today. Are you guys a gang? The state is all in red today. Are they a gang because they're all dressed in red? Poor Miss Hingerty happened to come in red today. I guess she's a member of the gang as well. Good afternoon. I'm Doug Weinstein, as y'all know, and I have the pleasure of representing Diamante Kendrick, along with my co-counsel, Katie Hingerty, who's sitting back there right now. Mr. J. Apt also represents Mr. Kendrick, but he can't be here right now. And good afternoon, Your Honor, and good afternoon, counsel. I am thrilled to finally be able to speak directly to you all. We've seen each other in the hallways, we've seen each other in the break room, and here in court, but I haven't been able to address you directly. The first thing I have to say is thank you. Thank you for your time over the last year. Thank you for your attention. It is sincerely appreciated. And I am going to do something that you have not seen much of. I am going to try to move at a brisk and deliberate pace and not take up any more of your time than I need to, because I think we have already taxed that enough at this point. I know that your time is valuable. I know you want to be able to spend the holidays with your family. I would also like Mr. Kendrick to be able to spend the holidays with his family without the weight of this trial hanging over him. So let's get a move on. You have heard a bit about Diamante Kendrick over the course of this trial, so I want to just talk about him for a few minutes. As you heard, Diamante, first of all, he originates from Miami. He came from Miami, he moved here, but he was a football star at Grady, and he had a scholarship to UGA to play football. That's a path out that a lot of people take.
Yep.
That is a path up. For a lot of folks in Diamante's situation, the path out is football, either as a career or as a scholarship opportunity to get a college education, to make a better life for yourself. And then another alternative is often music. And while he had that chance to go to UGA, it got derailed. And it got derailed through something that was at no point Mr. Kendrick's responsibility, but it got derailed. So he had to look for something else. And what did he look for? He looked for music. He turned to music. Because he didn't want to live in that life anymore. He wanted to move beyond it. But yeah, he made some mistakes back then. He made some mistakes back in 2015. And he has paid his price for that. He has paid his dues that he owed society for that. And since that time, he has done nothing but turn to his art, turn to his music, writing lyric after lyric after lyric, laying down tracks. But instead of allowing him to move on with his life, he has become sucked up in this targeting of Jeffrey Williams and has become collateral damage. And these attacks and use of his lyrics against him, the use of the lyrics against Jeffrey Williams, is frankly shameful. It's an attack on the First Amendment. And there's been so many rights, so many notions that I think we hold dear as a nation that the state has simply swept away. So why has the state taken a year of your life away from the work that you enjoy, the family that you love, your travel, your vacations, your children, grandchildren, parents? Why have they done that? What has been the point? The state told you in their opening that there was a point, and the point was that Jeffrey Williams was the head of a wolf pack. That is what they told you. But I don't think anyone sitting in here has seen that. You'll make that decision, not me. But I don't think anyone has seen that. What have they proven about Jeffrey Williams?
Nothing.
They have proven that he was a man that through incredible hard work, dedication, and talent came up out of Cleveland Avenue. And instead of forgetting everyone back there, instead of leaving them behind, he tried to reach out to those people that were friends of his that he came up with and say, you don't have to live this life. You can come with me. You can get into music. You can hone your craft. I can take you on the road with me. I can take you out of this. And some people took advantage of that and pulled themselves out, took advantage of Jeffrey's help. Some people tried to do that and failed, and Jeffrey Williams sent them back home. They didn't succeed. And Mr. Kendrick took a hold of that. And Mr. Kendrick took advantage of that opportunity that Jeffrey helped him. But instead, law enforcement put a target on Jeffrey Williams' back. Because God forbid anybody pull themselves out of that. Because what does society want to do? Drag them back again. Never let them leave their past behind. God forbid someone leave that behind and pull themselves up from their bootstraps. That's what we tell ourselves as a country. If you work hard enough, you can pull yourself out. Let's see what you guys say. So I would argue that we have not wasted your time here for a year. I'm going to argue that the state hasn't wasted your time, that this court hasn't wasted your time, and that we can salvage something out of this year that we have taken from you. And that is to send a message. And you're going to send a message by going in the back, looking at the evidence that's presented to you, and I think any review of that evidence would have you come back with findings of not guilty on all the charges against Mr. Kendrick.
On all of them? Oof.
Diamante Kendrick is one of Jeffrey Williams' best friends. And as I said, he's a casualty of law enforcement's war on Jeffrey Williams. Mr. Kendrick is charged with racketeering, murder, and several other charges, about 4, all relating to drugs and guns that were found at Jeffrey Williams' house when Mr. Kendrick was over there visiting. What evidence, what testimony, what witnesses, what physical evidence has the state shown you that Mr. Kendrick committed these crimes? I would say almost nothing that you've seen in this courtroom. Sure, they've played some videotapes, but what have you seen from this witness stand? Nothing. When this case began, we stood up here in opening and we told you the state would not be able to present evidence against Mr. Kendrick. We told you they're not going to be able to show you guns tied to him, that there would not be ballistics tied to Mr. Kendrick. There wouldn't be fingerprints tied to Mr. Kendrick. There would not be witnesses putting Mr. Kendrick at the scenes of these crimes. There wouldn't be any video of Mr. Kendrick involved in the tragic murder of Donovan Thomas. We told you that this case was a Krispy Kreme donut hole. I think the phrase I might prefer is a nothing burger. But that's what we told you. That's what we promised you. And that is a bold promise for a defense attorney to make. And it's one you'll rarely hear. But we made you that promise. And we also told you what would happen. That the state was going to parade hundreds of witnesses through here to throw everything they could against the wall to see what would stick. And frankly, I would submit that nothing has stuck. That we have kept our promises to you. What did the state promise you? Again, a wolf pack with a ruthless wolf pack leader. It's late in the day. With a ruthless wolf pack leader that is here. And instead, you saw that man that wouldn't leave his friends behind. As the state has told you, as Mr. Sharp told you, the state has to prove these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And they have to prove every element of these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. So let's just talk about reasonable doubt for a moment.
Talk to him, Doug.
So when the state began today, they told you that you don't have to seek out doubt. They don't want you to think about doubt. But the standard is they have to prove their case to you by guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Can you see that? Okay. They have to prove their state to you by guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for each of the charges, for each of the elements. It can't be down here as highly unlikely. It is a very high standard. Possibly guilty, probably guilty, doesn't do it. It has to be guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The court is going to charge you. They're going to tell you, for example, that grave suspicion is not sufficient. And let me read you the charge you're going to hear.
Interesting. This
Facts
is an
and
amazing
circumstances that merely
graphic.
place upon the defendant a grave suspicion of the crime charged, or that merely raises a speculation or conjecture of the defendant's guilt, are not sufficient to authorize a conviction of the defendant. Mr. Shart already explained so much about the evidence presented regarding the tragic killing of Donovan Thomas. And I need to start by saying I have deep, deep sympathy for the Thomas family. I cannot imagine what it must be like to lose a loved one to gun violence or any type of violence like that. I myself have 5 children, and just the thought of losing a child tears me up. So I don't know what they must be going through. But I think the evidence that has been shown to you does not demonstrate in any way that Mr. Kendrick is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the killing of Donovan Thomas. And as Mr. Shart so ably demonstrated to you, I think that there are others whose perhaps guilt or responsibility for Donovan Thomas's death has been demonstrated far more than my client's alleged responsibility. Briefly, to not belabor the point that Mr. Shart brought up, let's talk about Kenneth Copeland, Little Woody. He was a character, right? I mean, he sat in that witness box, and he's a charismatic fellow, a very interesting guy. And he has certainly made the most of his star turn in this courtroom. But he never testified on this stand that Diamante had anything to do with the killing of Donovan Thomas. He never testified on the stand that Demikian Garlington told him all this stuff, that Kendrick was involved in killing Donovan Thomas. He didn't tell you anything about, at the McDonald's, he learned anything about the killing of Donovan Thomas that Diamante Kendrick was involved in. You didn't hear it at Sky House. You don't hear that from the stand from him. To the degree you heard any of that, it is in that June interrogation tape that was played to you. He was not under oath during that interrogation. And you heard the circumstances from Mr. Shart, all the pressure that he was under. That was his 5th interrogation following the murder of Donovan Thomas, and the first time he comes up with this story clearly concocted by Demikian Garlington. How would you like the testimony of Demikian Garlington? Oh, you didn't hear any testimony from Demikian Garlington. Everything Garlington allegedly said, you heard through other people. And again, why did he lie to police? To use Mr. Shart's phrase, because I always steal from the best. He didn't want to wear the blue jumpsuit. He didn't want to go to Rice Street. He didn't want to be in the Fulton County Jail. He didn't want to face years of prison. He finessed the police. He finessed the police. He is a master liar. He is an admitted master liar. And he has methodologies he uses to lie and try to make it convincing. And he explained all of that to you. Again, why doesn't he want to go to Rice Street? Well, he told you what jail was like. On my cross, he explained what jail was like. When he most recently spent time in jail, he had a broken toilet full of feces. There were flies everywhere. He had no food to eat. He had to put his shirt over his face to act as a mask to try to keep the smell down. What rational person wouldn't do everything they can to avoid that? And of course, now is the next question. How do you know when to ever believe Kenneth Copeland? And I don't have a great answer for you on that. I can tell you what he said on the stand during my cross. You know, he said hand to God, I am telling the truth now. I have God in my heart.
Yep.
I have God in my head. Now, the state would have you believe about Mr. Copeland and Mr. Zachary, who I'll address next, that they got on the stand and they lied here. And they lied here, I'm sure they're going to say, because they're afraid of the defendants. And that is why they lie. But I'm going to argue to you that actually they got on the stand here and they told the truth. And they did it really almost in an act of bravery. Because when they get on the stand, the people they're afraid of is the state. They're afraid of the state. The state is the one that has the power to prosecute them. The state is the one that has the power to put them in prison. The state is the one that has the power to put Mr. Copeland in that jail cell with the non-working toilets and the feces and everything else that he is trying to avoid. But despite being afraid of the state, Mr. Copeland gets up here and tells you the truth. Quindarius Zachary, again, he lies to police. He lies to police repeatedly. And when I confronted him with those lies, why did you lie? You know, he said, Yak never told me nothing. Yak never showed me nothing but love. Never showed me nothing but love. But he lied on them anyway. And why did he lie? Because Garlington came to him with a play. And what's the play? The play is to blame other people for the death of Donovan Thomas. Who did Mr. Zachary see in that infinity? He never saw nobody in that infinity but Woody.
Uh-oh. Don't say Woody again.
The Texaco. Oh my gosh, there's the smoking gun. There's the smoking gun that shows that my client murdered Donovan Thomas. He's on video at a Texaco station a block away before the murder. Heaven forbid. He pulls up in that Texaco in a Pontiac. He leaves the Pontiac. He goes, you've seen this video 1,000 times. Well, maybe not that many, but it must feel like it. He leaves the Pontiac to go into the Texaco. And he buys some junk food in the Texaco, goes back into the Pontiac. He sits in the Pontiac. He talks to another car that pulls up. He gets back in the Pontiac. And he leaves in a Pontiac. Go in the back. Watch the video 1,001st time. You're never going to see him get in an Infinity. You're never going to see it. How does he get in the Infinity? Was there a witness that got up here and put him in the Infinity? No. Do they have video from the surrounding area that shows him transferring into the Infinity? No. I mean, presumably, he teleports into the Infinity. I have no idea what their theory is going to be when they argue to you, but I'm going to be fascinated to hear it, because there's been no testimony about him in an Infinity. How do we know it's an Infinity in a drive-by? Well, the state is pretty sure it's an Infinity. The state put on, this is one of my favorite experts of all of the state's experts, they put on an Infinity identification expert who has worked with, Infinity for years. And he can tell in any kind of grainy video that that car is an Infinity. That's an amazing expert, but I'll take his testimony. That's fine. I think he's right. I think it's an Infinity. And Mr. Kendrick is not in an Infinity. And it's pretty hard to do a drive-by shooting if you are not in the car that did the drive-by. It is absurd. So again, there's no eyewitness testimony of Mr. Kendrick involved in the shooting. No weapons tying Mr. Kendrick to it. No ballistics. No fingerprints. No gunpowder residue. No DNA. Nothing. Nothing that you would expect to see. Now, the state has told you, well, you can look at circumstantial evidence. This is true. You can. And the state put up a dollar bill with some puzzle pieces missing. So, well, you can kind of infer that that's a dollar bill. And that's true. But don't go try to spin that dollar bill anywhere, because that dollar bill will not spend. And this evidence is not sufficient to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. Where's the cell phone data? Oh my gosh. You poor folks. You had to spend days listening to experts come in here and talk to you about cell phone location data.
Get him, Doug.
Where was Mr. Kendrick's cell phone location data putting him there? They didn't show you any.
Nope.
Who killed Donovan Thomas?
Uh-oh.
I don't know who killed Donovan Thomas, but I think Mr. Shart's theory has some merit.
Look at Miss
Let's
Hilton
turn to the
squirming. She
allegations
knows-
that YSL is a gang.
She knows who did it.
The state had to bring in 5 different gang experts. You guys had to sit through 5 different gang experts to try to convince you that YSL is a gang. Now, they gave you the definition of a traditional gang, and these gang experts, who, as Mr. Sharp pointed out, all sit there and train each other in this insular little unit, but they told you, yeah, they're not a traditional gang. They don't meet the definition of a traditional gang. But lo and behold, we have another category of gang. It's a hybrid gang. Ooh, a hybrid gang. This is fascinating. Let's talk about hybrid gangs. What's a hybrid gang?
Come on,
Oh, a
Doug.
hybrid gang is whatever we say it is at any given point in time to fit our narrative. That's what a hybrid gang is. I use the term nose of wax. They can twist it any way they want to fit the group of people they want and say they're a hybrid gang. It's a catch-all. It's a catch-all used to throw all kinds of people together and say, well, you don't meet the definition of a gang, but because we are gang experts that train each other, we have decided you are a hybrid gang.
Come on, Doug.
Well, hybrid gang. So a hybrid gang apparently is one where, according to their experts, Bloods and Crips can live together in peace and harmony with each other to accomplish some type of goal. Does that make sense to anyone in here that has any basic understanding of the way that gangs work? You've had the state's own witnesses come here on the stand and talk about how ridiculous it is that you can say, that anyone can say, that YSL is a gang when you can have Bloods and Crips and Independents and all of these people be members of this alleged gang. As Mr. Sharp talked about, there's none of the traditional gang elements. There's no beating in. Anybody can call themselves a member of YSL. You know, someone, I guess, alleged there might be a $25 dues fee or something ridiculous to that effect. But there's nothing that shows them together as a
we
gang.
talked about
Oh, well,
that,
wait. They are a gang because look at these pictures of YSL wearing green clothing. That must mean they're a gang. You guys are mostly in blue and black. You associate with each other here today. Are you guys a gang? The state is all in red today. Are they a gang because they're all dressed in red? Poor Miss Hingerty happened to come in red today. I guess she's a member of the gang as well. It is absurd.
Oh, Doug,
Lil
got it.
Wayne
That
has
was awesome.
ESPN on his arm. ESPN.
That's funny.
I guess Lil Wayne is surprised that he's a member of YSL too. My client's got ESPN on his body. No, that can't be because he was a football star and in his mind probably liked ESPN. It must be because he's a member of a gang called YSL. So it's wonderful
Cook 'em,
that the
Doug.
state's gang experts have such insights into the mental thinking of my client and Lil Wayne and everybody else. Now the state may say, well, they're not a gang, even though they all dress in red today, looking quite dapper. Because, well, they're not,
Miss
they don't
Hilton
have
keeps
some
smiling,
criminal
too. She
objective.
likes it.
Well, I don't know. Let's look at the way the state indicts people. The state's around Investigator Viverito. Investigator Viverito is the last person I can find anywhere on video or that you've seen on video holding that missing $500,000 watch.
Oh,
Did she steal the watch? Was that an overt act and can further into the conspiracy? Maybe I should go to a grand jury and try to indict this. It's the
Dang.
state gang or something ludicrous like that. Everything gang investigators see is viewed from the viewpoint of it must be a gang. Mr. Kendrick, look at the photo they showed you of Mr. Kendrick in the bandana shirt. Go back and look at it in color. The gang investigator says it's red. It is orange. Orange as the sun. You look at it, you decide, don't take my word for it, don't take their word for it, don't take the state's words for it. Use your own eyes. But when you're a gang investigator, everything has to fit the narrative. And that's the narrative. The snake on Mr. Kendrick's chest. Did he get that snake because YSL is a gang? Or did he get that snake because it represents the tree of knowledge in the Adam and Eve story? Well, they can tell you. I saw a mentalist Saturday night at a show, and this mentalist was amazing. This mentalist, you would think of something, and the mentalist would tell you, "Oh my gosh, you're thinking of a number between 1 and 50. It's 47." It's actually quite impressive. Apparently, Investigator Viverito and these other gang experts are mentalists. Maybe they will be at the next fundraiser I go to. I'd like to see some more of their tricks. Mr. Kendrick does modeling shots. So someone will say to Mr. Kendrick, "Hey, hold this hat." "Oh, that's gang. The hat has a rat with a line through it. That's gang activity. We're sending a message to everybody." There's a photo taken outside at the time of a video shoot for music. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, look at that. Gang activity. There's photos of Mr. Kendrick wearing clothes that say SLAT outside of a recording studio. More gang activity. More people trying to pull themselves out, get into music, exercise their First Amendment rights. More gang activity. It's just exhausting, folks. All right. The racketeering charge. Racketeering is very complicated, as you all know. And the state explained racketeering to you. So I'm not going to go into all of the details of what it takes for you guys to find racketeering. Although I do want to repeat, you have to find each of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt, and you're not going to be able to do that with Mr. Kendrick. So I only want to focus on a few parts. Just bear with me. It's late in the day. Late in the day. Just give me a little more time. A few parts of the racketeering charge. First of all, the state has not shown a conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. What is a conspiracy? It is an understanding to accomplish or pursue a common criminal objective. Criminal. There's been no common criminal objective shown. What has been shown to you, and what was shown to you even earlier today? A series of independent, disparate acts over and over again. All kinds of different people committing criminal acts. I'm not going to argue to you that criminal acts were not committed, but they have not shown any relationship between these acts. They have not shown you anything that's shown it was done for a common criminal objective. That was not demonstrated. Again, as Mr. Sharp said, when Mr. Stevens was here, Tick, and Mr. Stevens was talking about selling pot, he did that for his own benefit. He's not paying up the ladder. And by the way, there is no ladder. Investigator Viverito told you because this is a hybrid gang, there's no structure to it. So I don't know how Mr. Tick is supposed to, Mr. Stevens is supposed to spread the money around. But it doesn't matter. They're going to say there's a common criminal objective. Nothing has been shown. Tick. I have to go on a side note on Tick, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Kendrick, Mr. Williams, they were trying to avoid the fate of Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens, remember, I'd love you to go back and listen, read his testimony. Remember, look at your notes. At the age of 11, society threw him away. They threw him away. They tossed him in juvie, where he learned about gangs and drugs and everything else. Threw his life away. And he's trying to get his life in order again. And he's dragged back into this. State says one of the objectives was money and power. Where's the money flowing? Where's the money? Where's the money coming in? The state had the power of the courts, their subpoena power. They could have gotten Jeffrey Williams' banking and financial records. They could have subpoenaed his accountants. They could have gotten all of that to see the money flowing. Did they do it? No. Why didn't they do it? Well, I'm going to argue to you they didn't do it because there was nothing there.
Facts.
If they did it, it would undercut their case about seizing Mr. Williams' assets, about seizing $8 million worth of jewelry that he earned in the music business, about seizing all of those cars, about seizing the ring off of his finger and keeping it. We don't want to see those records because we don't want evidence that he earned all of this from his music and his hard work. No efforts of money and power as part of a conspiracy deriving from this gang. The judge is going to tell you in your instructions, mere association with an enterprise is insufficient by itself to establish a conspiracy to violate the RICO Act. Mere association. And that's what you have here, mere association. A bunch of guys that grew up together, were around each other, and that some of whom were trying to make it out, and some of whom were trying to help others make it out. Mr. Kendrick was trying to make it out. Mr. Kendrick would not let himself be thrown away like happened to Mr. Stevens. So I don't believe there's a conspiracy that's been shown beyond a reasonable doubt. What else has the state not shown? Well, they've not shown a lot, but I'm just going to focus on a few. The state hasn't shown that Diamante Kendrick knowingly and willingly joined this conspiracy, and they must show that. Well, first of all, I understand their difficulty. I understand their problem. How do you show that you knowingly and willingly joined the conspiracy with a criminal purpose when one doesn't exist? So that's their first challenge.
Exactly.
That's their first challenge. What did they do to try to show knowing and willing join? Well, he hung out with some guys that did some bad things. He allegedly is part of this YSL gang that's not a gang. And by the way, you heard testimony, Mr. Kendrick was signed to the YSL record label. So I guess he knowingly and willingly signed to the YSL record label. But that is not the same as knowingly and willingly joining a conspiracy. Depending on the outcome of this case, at least to this point, being signed to a record label, even a rap record label, is not a crime in the U.S. What else hasn't the state shown? They haven't shown a pattern of racketeering activity. And the key here is pattern. And part of the key to pattern is there has to be interrelatedness. And I'm sorry about the legalese. I promise I am. But I have to talk about it. These acts have to be interrelated. And instead, what you've seen for a year of your time is isolated incident after isolated incident. We're going to throw everything against the wall and hope something sticks. But even if a few things stick, if they're not interrelated, it is not a pattern. So I believe that when you look at all of the evidence, you're going to need to go back to the jury room. And I believe once you deliberate, you're going to find that Mr. Kendrick is not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of conspiracy to violate RICO. The last charges are easier to discuss and will go faster. Every count, counts 57, 58, 61, and 63. These are the last four counts against Mr. Kendrick. All of those are based upon drugs and guns found at Jeffrey Williams' house. Not a single witness, photograph, fingerprint, lab test, DNA, everything you can imagine. Nothing shows that Mr. Kendrick possessed any of those guns and drugs. Nothing. Yeah. When they arrested Mr. Kendrick that day, did they test his clothing for any type of samples that there might be drugs or... No, nothing. You didn't see any of that. Why was he arrested? Why is he arrested for drugs and guns? It's merely his presence at Jeffrey Williams' house that day. The judge is also going to tell you this, and bear with me while I read this, because it's too long to memorize. You are not authorized to find a person who was merely present at the scene of the commission of a crime at the time was committed guilty of consent in and concurrence in the commission of the crime unless the evidence shows beyond a reasonable doubt that such person committed the alleged crime, helped in the actual perpetration of the crime, or participated in the criminal endeavor. They're trying to show Mr. Kendrick guilty of those crimes just by being at Jeffrey Williams' house. I don't know about y'all, but when someone invites me over to their home, I do not ask before I go there, do you have drugs stashed away throughout your house? I do not ask before I go there, have you got a machine gun hidden under the couch in the basement? Have you got guns stashed in your cabinets? I don't ask that. And when I get to their house, I don't go looking for those things.
Talk to him, Doug.
Why did they charge him with this? Why did they charge Mr. Kendrick with this? Because, as I have told you, and from what you could see in this courtroom, Mr. Kendrick has done nothing but work on his music. But they have to drag him in. They have to suck him in to this vortex caused by their relentless, ridiculous pursuit of Jeffrey Williams. It is offensive and it is absurd, and presumably they felt they needed to do it to help out on the Rico case and to help get Jeffrey Williams. Briefly turning to each of those counts, count 57, participation in criminal street gang activity. That is purely based on his alleged possession of marijuana and a firearm. But again, no one got up here and said Mr. Kendrick possessed any of the firearms or any of the drugs at the house. Now, here's what the state is likely to say. This is what I'm anticipating. Possession can be one of two ways, and you will hear the judge instruct you on this as well. It can be actual possession, you're holding it, or constructive possession. Constructive possession requires the state to show that Mr. Kendrick intended to possess those weapons, intended to possess those drugs. So when the state tells you that, I want you to please remember what I've just told you and think, what witnesses have you seen? What evidence has been presented that Mr. Kendrick intended to possess those weapons or those drugs?
Right, and so what we have ultimately is that there is no evidence. None.
Donut hole, nothing burger. The other three counts, 58, 61, 63, those are all marijuana or firearms. And again, I don't need to repeat myself. While I have had wonderful help from Ms. Hingerty and Mr. Apt on this case, for the most part, Diamante only has me up here representing him. The state has an army of prosecutors, investigators, law enforcement to assist them.
Snitches.
So, I mean, Diamante only has David. And I just pray that I have done my best to slay this giant Goliath that is pursuing him.
Ooh, I like
the
that.
state has not met their high burden of showing guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I would even argue the state hasn't met these lower standards either. It's just not been done.
That chart's amazing.
I think when you go back there and deliberate, you'll come up with the same idea, the same conclusion. This case against Mr. Kendrick should have never been brought. That same Saturday night when I saw The Mentalist, a friend was saying to me, well, your problem is that the state has the last word. You're going to get up and talk to the jury, but then the state gets to go again. And they're great lawyers from the state. And they may not remember what you say. They're going to have the last word. And I said, no, you are wrong. You are wrong. The state does not have the last word. The jury has the last word. You guys have the last word. Each of you will decide the fate of Mr. Kendrick. Each of you individually will decide whether the state has met their high burden on each of these counts and on each of the elements of the counts to show that he committed this beyond a reasonable doubt. When you go back and deliberate, I believe that you can go back and send the message that targeting people, fixating on individuals who have managed to climb out of their circumstance, attacking people for their music and their lyrics and their art is wrong. Is wrong. Targeting only people of color for their music and lyrics is wrong.
Oh, get him.
Winnie Lee, when he was on the stand, told you, he told all of us, even though I am a black man, not everything I write about is true or autobiographical. He has an imagination. Mr. Kendrick has an imagination. He has things to say about what he sees in the world around him, as does Winnie Lee, as does Jeffrey Williams. And the use of lyrics and artistic expression against individuals is wrong, it's un-American, and it shows the desperation of the state that they have to reach to that level in order to try to make a case against Mr. Kendrick. You can show that maybe, just maybe, we really do believe it when we tell people that through hard work, you can pull yourself up from wherever you came from. And that we, as Americans, as people, we believe in redemption. So I ask you to please remember that during and after the state's closing, to remember that when you're deliberating, to remember that each of you individually gets to make that decision of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So I'm going to ask for the sale, because that is what you're supposed to do, right? And I'm going to ask you to go back there, deliberate, and come back with not guilty verdicts for Mr. Kendrick on all the charges against him. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the last year of your life that you sacrificed to be here and fulfill your role as citizens. I really appreciate it.
Wow.